Right, okay, cool. I think we can start now. Let me share my screen real quick. This one. Right, okay. I hope you can see my screen.
Yes.
Cool. Oops, sorry. Right, okay, cool. Hi everybody. Thank you so much for being here today. Today we are very grateful to be meeting again every month during our community call, and this time around it's a little bit later. It was supposed to be January, but we moved it a little bit to February because of speakers availability, and we're very happy to have Angelina here with us, who will share more about MRV. And I'm pretty sure some of you have also been engaging with MRV, and we're also interested to know what kind of strategies that you have been already doing, and maybe you can also share so that other people could also learn from you, right? Cool. So I'm sorry that I'm not opening my camera because my internet is a bit weak today because I'm in a rural area, but hopefully you can hear me well. Before we start, also for Angelina as well, because this is her first time attending our community call. So perhaps you can let us know where are you joining us from. Feel free to write in the chat box and share where you're joining us from. I'm joining from Malaysia right now. I'm in the Borneo side of Malaysia today, this week. Hi, Ali from Uganda. Yes. Right, Peter is from Kenya, Nairobi. Keep it coming. So it's a little bit of introduction as well for Angelina to kind of know where people are coming from. Cool. Thank you so much, everybody, for sharing. Just also letting you know that we are recording this session. So yeah, just letting you know that. So quick welcome to everybody again. Before we start, just letting you know that we have a few house rules. Number one is please keep your microphone muted when you're not speaking, and also feel free to turn on your camera to say hi because we are all like we're very like this call is like super global. So if you would like to, we'd love to see your beautiful face. And also please get involved and ask questions. And I think we can also learn from each other, not just from Angelina, of course. Thank you so much, Angelina, for making the time. But we can also give your feedback and then learn from each other. Right. So just a quick vibe check before we start with Angelina's session. On a scale of Baby Yoda, which one are you? Feel free to write in the chat box. Okay, I'm gonna admit Deborah. Peter is number 4. Okay. Relatable. Yeah, feel free to share. Max is an 8. Okay. Right, keep it coming. Hi Deborah. Welcome. Alip is number 9. Jago is 1. Cool. Keep it coming. Kristen is number 9. Right. Danish is 10. Wait, there's no 10. Maybe you can send us a picture, Danish, on what is 10. Right, cool. Before we start, I just like to also know, and perhaps Angelina as well, in terms of like what kind of MRV strategies that you are using right now. If anyone would like to speak, feel free to unmute yourself and just give us a few words on your strategies at the moment. Anyone? Orange. Yep. Let me see. And someone is writing. Yes, Diogo. Feel free.
Yeah. Hi. Good morning, everybody. Good morning from Brazil. Over here, we've been sharing the activities, the cultivation, the stewardship. We've been visiting each other to help make a experiences and hands-on practices. And these gatherings, these meetups, they also serve as a verification tool, because we work with long-term planting, so trees, and year after year, these people, they came in the first day to help as volunteers to plant, and then come back years later to visit, to practice again. And this methodology helps distribute and create knowledge, and also validates.
Right. Thank you so much, Diego. So it's more on like validating each other's project, if I get
Yeah,
that. Yeah.
yeah, visiting each other. This year we want to make meetups, organize meetups in other regions too, so people can visit the food forests and all that.
Right. Okay, cool. Thank you so much, Diego. Anyone else would like to share before we start with Angelina's presentation? Or we can also do later, just to keep you listen first, and then if you think of something, feel free to write in the chat box. Right. Cool. Angelina, before we start, and while I'm trying to share the PowerPoint slide, perhaps you can do a quick introduction on who you are, and then like a little bit of your background. Right. To you, Angelina.
Yes, Fatin. Thank you. And hi, everyone. I'm Angelina. Thank you for having me here. I'm Angelina Serwaa, a restoration ecologist and a graduate student at Yale School of Environment. I'm focusing on ecosystem management as my core major of study. And then I'm particularly interested in protected area conservation and forest monitoring. I am particularly interested in how we measure and track restoration outcomes in the field. And I'm happy to be here with you, or happy to share and happy to hear from you. I wouldn't say that I am an expert in MRV, but in some way, somehow, we all practice MRV in some sense. And so that's going to be, our focus of discussion for today. But today we're going to talk about, MRV comes in many forms, climate MRV, biodiversity, ecosystem, but today we're going to focus on biodiversity. Farin, if it's okay, can I proceed?
Yes, feel free. I hope you can see my the slide deck that I'm sharing.
Yes, it's perfect.
Cool.
Okay, right. So basically, we're going to talk about biodiversity MRV, from local action to trusted evidence. So, we're going to discuss this in a little bit, and then perhaps we can all go around and share what we've been doing, or what we learned, something new, something surprising about this particular presentation. I hope that it will be very interactive as possible. So we're going to look at MRV, biodiversity MRV, in a very practical sense, is what I mean. So I presume that, many of us are already monitoring our work in some sense. And so this session is more about giving that work a shared structure so that it becomes more clearer, more credible, and then easier to learn from over time. Or that kind of monitoring will be able to be, monitored with time, or the repeatability of the kind of monitoring we're looking at. Yeah. Next slide, please.
Oops, sorry. Give me a second. I'm trying to move to the next one. Oops. Okay.
I'm so sorry.
Okay. Okay, got it.
Right. So, one will ask, why is even MRV so much of him? Why should we pay attention to MRV? Why do we need MRV in some sense? Why do we need biodiversity MRV for a topic of discussion? Globally, there are shared biodiversity and restoration goals. For example, the Sustainable Development Goals on top of my head, Sustainable Development Goal 13, Climate Action Goal 14, life underwater, and Goal 15, life on land, like trees and then all the animals or biodiversity that is on land. And then we also have other goals from like the CPD goals, Convention for Biological Diversity, um, the Bond Challenge to restore about 350 million hectares of degraded and deforested landscapes by 2030. So these are very challenging goals, right? But they are also necessary actions to guide what we should do um, to achieve the targeted goals. So what really matters is what happens on the ground, because this requires local interventions. These goals are not sitting in some form of isolation. People must come up with intervention, practical interventions to achieve these goals, right? So we are all doing this in some sense in our various regions and countries and local areas. So MRV exists to help us understand whether local actions are making a difference and how they contribute to those shared goals. Um, the picture that I put there, that's me down there. So there's a before and after picture I took. This picture I took from Rwanda. So this like a landscape that was really degraded. All the trees there were felled by the local people for firewood and for some various reasons. The water was heavily polluted, and this water is actually a head source for other agricultural areas. So people had choked this water to extent that it was almost dying. It was not flowing anymore. And so local people and some NGOs came in to restore this area. And as you can see, the after picture where I'm standing, the water is clearer, it's flowing, the forest is back, the forest behind me is almost like very intact. So these are all forms of MRV, right? It gives us, so you're giving even a picture of what used to be before, and then what happens after your intervention. Is a great way of showing what you have done in the form of verification or reporting. But we'll go into details of what the M is, the R is, and the V are. Yeah. Next slide.
Sorry, I'm having trouble. Okay, 1 second. Okay, good.
Yeah. Well, we got it. So historically, MRV has been most established in the carbon space. I am a biodiversity person, so that pains me a lot. I have a personal bias. But yeah, it has been established in the carbon space, reflecting its central role in climate policy and the carbon market. But there are many forms of it, right? Like as we talked a little bit earlier, or talked about earlier on. So just to reiterate a little bit, there is carbon MRV, there is biodiversity MRV, which we're discussing today, and there is water MRV. Sometimes people take eDNAs, those are like samples from water, and they store it in a certain way, take it to the lab, and give it a barcode, and compare it with the barcodes that they have in their database. We're not discussing that today, but just giving a little bit brief on that. And then they're able to trace the genetics of the samples that they took to, compare it to the barcodes that they have in their database to see, the genus or the family where it's coming from. So they are able to detect new species in that way. So there's also some form of water MRV, there's ecosystem service MRV. So there are plenty of that. So what is MRV? What does it stand for? So MRV stands for measurement or monitoring in some sense, reporting and verification, right? Um, it's the framework used to track, communicate, and validate outcomes in climate conservation and restoration initiative. So in other words, a simple way to check whether our actions are actually making a difference. That is what MRV is about. So at its core, MRV is just a way of answering a simple question. Are the actions we are taking, for example, are the actions we are taking actually leading to a real result on the ground, right? So MRV helps us move from what activities that we did to what we so to I mean we what we can show, or what we can show that changed over time per our interventions, right? So essentially it's making the information more trustworthy, right? So biodiversity, exists in many forms, as you can see on my slides, right? So when you talk about biodiversity, talking about all the different, living organisms that we have, right? So you can talk about the forests, the trees, the insects, the birds, the primates. All these are biodiversity forms. So, that is also to say that there is no single metric that can capture all these. So what we measure depends on what the questions we are asking are. So you can't use one metric to measure birds and use the same thing to measure, for example, tree species. They're very different, right? So in that sense, there are different measures or metric that we use for these. So essentially, biodiversity MRV relies on different indicators. This is precisely what I'm trying to say, such as, for example, species presence, whether a species is there or not, the abundance, habitat condition, or regeneration, those of us that are into forest restoration, rather than one metric. So in practice, we choose a small, meaningful set of indicators, that best reflect what we are trying to measure. Yeah, next slide. Right. So how do we know our actions are impactful? Anybody? You can jump in if you want.
Yes. Anyone would like to share? Feel free to unmute yourself. Or if you cannot speak, maybe you can also write in the chat box.
Yeah.
Yes, feel free to unmute yourself.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Sakwa is saying comparing with baselines.
Nice. Great. Compare before and after key indicators. Awesome. I mean, these are great responses that okay, I think there's another one in. Okay, yeah. So comparing with baseline information, compare before and after key indicators is a great way of knowing if our actions were very impactful. I mean, if you really don't have a baseline information, there's nothing to compare it in the first place, right? So it's quite difficult to say this worked or not. So that's essentially, what we're talking about. And thank you, for these responses. I'm grateful. I don't feel I am alone in this room. So, we plant trees, restore mangroves, introduce, agroforestry in a specific landscape for various reasons, or, ensure protection of forested areas, you know. But the key question always remains, how do we know these actions are working, right? Um, and one key questions that we could ask ourselves is, did the change actually happen? What changed after the intervention? And then, is the change positive, stable, or declining? The last point is very important for me. So we want to know the additionalities, right? So that's when sometimes what your comments is very relevant here. What's the baseline data? What's the baseline information? So because you want to know what has changed. If you don't have that, that's going to be quite challenging. You need some time to prove it. But so it's also very key to have a baseline data before you start a project. So we really want to know the positive change, whether or not it's stable, or the interventions are not even working, they are declining, right? Next slide, please. So we're just going to zoom in into the specific details of what MRVs are. So let's start with monitoring or measurement. So what are we measuring or monitoring? So I would say that in practice, measurements often, combine several approaches. That you see in those pictures, either field observation and note taking. It's okay to go to the field, see what is being done, observe, record. You know, these are very basic stuff that we are all doing already. They are not necessarily wrong, they are excellent, right? You could add more to it. Many projects start with simple notebook or field sheets, recording what's seen during the visit. So it's great. And then we could also do sampling design and plot-based methods. As you can see, doing a tree hugging activity over there and measuring the tree DBH, right? So many NGOs are already doing this. So for example, if you're doing something on restoration and then you want to know whether or not your activities were, or your interventions or restoration strategies were successful, you might want to know something about, the diversity, the basal area, the species richness, the composition differences between sites, or compare it to your baseline data. So you want to know something like that, right? And many NGOs already, or probably most of you here are already doing this. So it's great. So these are times where you probably will establish a fixed plot or transect area or for measurement, right? And these areas, when you establish them, you could establish them in a permanent way. So sometimes people call it permanent sample plots, right? So, and you make it permanent because you want to repeatedly go there and then take or collect data. So you want to make it permanent sample plots. It's very easy. You could put pillars at the plots, at the edges of the plots, and then you mark them so you can repeatedly refer back to it if you have to. That would be easier to identify. And the other way is to also record the GPS coordinates of those points so you can always refer to those plots. So typical variables to measure in this particular setting is, for example, the tree diameter. As you can see that I'm measuring using a diameter tape, and also a tree height using a simple tool like dendrometer. But if you don't have dendrometer, it's also fine. You could use the hand method. I do that sometimes when I'm in the field, if I forget my dendrometer. So then what I would use is the hand method. I would just grab a stick, okay? And then, point it from my shoulder to the tip of my fingers when I stretch it. So the length of my arm is what I'm going to use for measurement. So when I stretch it, I'll break the tip off. I want just the measurement from my arm to the tip of my finger. And then I will hold the middle portion of the stick and stretch it to my eyeball until the tip of the top of that stick touches the tip of the tree that I'm looking at, and the bottom touches the bottom of the tree. So I will have to always be going back to be able to detect that, oh, from my eyeball and from where I'm standing, I am able to see the top of the tree and the bottom of the tree just by looking at the stick in my hand. And so as I keep going back, the point where I'm standing, measuring from there with my tape to that tree is the height of that tree. So it's very, very practical things that we could do. Sometimes we don't really necessarily need sophisticated tools in our various communities. If we don't have them, these are very simple things we could do. And then we could also do seedling or sapling counts to assess regeneration, to see what is actually under the story or under the canopy trees. And then also recall GPS coordinates of those plots. Um, and then one other thing we could also do, I think many of us are already into this, technology assisted measurement. Um, Sometimes you necessarily, depending on what the questions you're asking or what you're looking for, you don't necessarily need to establish fixed plots and be measuring stuff. If you want to be measuring stuff, that means that you are looking at specific questions like we talked about already, diversity and all those kind of things, diversity of species. But if you're looking at carbon and stuff like that, you can just use a drone. So drone-based measurement to assess canopy cover, so to look at the area restored or spatial extent. I don't know. I think nothing. Fatin told me that some of you already into using bioacoustic sensors, and so those things are also things that you could use to detect presence of birds and bats and other vocal species in an area. You could also use camera traps for wildlife, basically to detect wildlife presence and absence. Um, and that is also another interesting way of knowing what species is here and what is not. So again, the key thing here is not the tool itself, I would say, but the method that is clear and repeatable. Right, next slide. Right, so reporting. I would say that reporting is basically, organizing and communicating what was measured, right? So you have taken some form of measurement, but how do you communicate that to a third party or report back to your donors or something else, or just to, have a proof that this intervention actually worked? So how do you communicate that? There are several ways of doing this. One of my favorites is OH, as outcome harvesting. So this is it's a form of report. You can call it a report, but it's very special in the sense that how it is structured. So you would find areas where you are supposed to answer questions like who did what, right? So now it's beginning to be very, very specific. So whether it's an individual, community, organization, so who did what and where and when. So all these are very important details for outcome harvesting, and what exactly was done and what changed as a result of what was done. So it's basically just answering like, the 4 W's in some sense. Who did what and when, why was that done, and what changed as a result. So, and then also one key thing about outcome harvesting is that you must have like photos to display. You could have photos of before and after so that people can compare and see what was done, who did it, when, where, and then we can associate, your storyline with the photos that you have submitted. So that's one way of reporting it. So you could put that under, progress report or something. Um, the fourth point, right? And then the other way of also looking at it is map-based reporting, maps showing where restoration or monitoring took place, for visual representations as well. And then also, our usual spreadsheet table, to summarize measurements like survival rates, average DBH, seedling density. I mean, all those kind of things. You could put them in a spreadsheet. Anything that could be put in a spreadsheet is also a form of monitoring, a form of reporting. And sometimes other people demand that because they want to see the details of what you did. So they're not just looking for your report, but they're looking for the data as well. So that could also be a form of reporting. And then also, the written progress reports, short monthly, quarterly summaries describing activities. And then also the ODK, Open Data Kit, that's often sit between measurements and reporting. So usually a mobile data collection tool is used on a smartphone or tablets to record field observation digitally. So data are collected using pre-designed forms of device on the device, right? Where users can enter, measurements such as the count, the observations, or even photos, and then upload them on the handheld device. So the data are stored on the device while offline, and are also sent to a central system or database once there's an internet connection or there's an internet available. So from there, the data can be exported into other forms like maps or spreadsheets or dashboards. I mean, all sort of things for, analysis and reporting. Yeah, next slide. So finally, this is one of my favorite slides, verification. These screenshots are actually coming from me. The first on the left, it's me. The same picture I put there where I was collecting my data, tree hugging and collecting DBH in Rwanda. So what I did was just to swipe up on my phone, and then you would see exactly where I was. So the coordinates are there, and I'm pointing the coordinate to the geotagged photos. So you could essentially just take photos with your smartphone, right? And then it gives you not just a picture, but it also gives you where you are. So in other words, if we want to prove this, so for example, if we did enrichment planting is just basically introducing species of high conservation concerns to an area, right? So you are saying that the biodiversity in this area has gone down, and you have introduced all those species that would probably have gone locally extinct. You have introduced them, but we want to see them. We want to see if they are there or not, right? So you just taking a picture, and it's not just a picture, it's also showing us where you did what. And so you have those coordinates, and you can collect all those pictures together and plot them. And then you have a sense of the distribution of those trees that were introduced in the area. And I think it's very interesting. It's very fascinating. So I was in Rwanda. I put it on a Google map, and now I saw that, okay, so this is where I was. I was in Rwanda, and then the coordinates are also there. So you could have many of these and plot them, and then you see, the distribution of the data that you're trying to communicate. So it just basically answers the question, how do we know the report change actually happened? So the geotagged photos are one of the simple verification tools. Like I said, it has the GPS coordinates. And one important thing is it also has the date and time that these photos were taken. So it has a lot of interesting biodata and then location metadata. So for example, if you have 100-hectare restored area, um, so geotag photos can be taken with ease at regular intervals. So such as like every 200 meters at predefined observation points. So at each point, several photos can be taken to document site conditions. So these geotagged images can then be mapped to show where observations were made, providing a simple field-based and legitimate form of verification. So it's important that photos are sent in a way. So it's a critical thing. You have to send, if you have to send photos, it's important to always remember that the photos are sent in a way that does not, strip off the location data, right? So you don't take screenshots of your photo and then submit that one. You would lose the metadata. You will not see the coordinates. So you don't do that, right? So you send it in a way that you have all the information intact. And it's going to be pretty very simple to do that, right? For example, directly from your phone rather than screenshot. And then photos sent to Drive, cloud-based system is great. Um, Emails, I tried it on my emails and it worked. So I opened and then all the data was there, the date, the time, where the coordinates, everything was there. So sending it by emails also work, but usually a Dropbox, cloud-based is great. This maintains the geodata, so it's essentially important to note that. I would say that there are a little bit limitations to this. Photos alone cannot confirm quantities, right? Or long-term survival. So in my opinion, I'm thinking that they work best when combined with field measurement, reports, and repeated monitoring, right? And then also citizen science is also another interesting thing. You know, communities reporting these are part of the same systems, right? So it's not like the data is separate, the people are separate. We are together, right? That's more like a citizen science. Basically a handheld device and mostly the simple tool that makes this possible. So I'll give an example from Ghana. Um, in Ghana, there's a particular NGO. Um, if I remember their name correctly, um, I don't remember their name correctly, but I think it's, I'm not too sure of their name. I don't remember it correctly. I think it's Arusha, Ghana. There's also another NGO that did the same thing. An NGO provided handheld device to, fringe communities, those people that lives just immediately around a protected area. So community members use these handheld device to take, photographs of illegal activities that are happening. So people around that area used to just barge into the forest and collect any resources that they want, either by digging gold, polluting the water, killing an animal, and all those kind of illegal hunting and all those kind of illegal activities. So it's you can always do real-time monitoring when you're sitting in your office. You have to do it with people. So that's when citizen science comes in. So if you give these handheld devices to people, usually they are moving around and about. They're going about their activities of the day, either going to the farm or doing some activities around. So they are able to detect what's going on easily, better than you sitting in the office. So when they see those things, what they do is that they take photos of those things and then send immediately. Some of these handheld devices don't even need internet connection, and then they are able to send it. So they send it to a central system for timely intervention. That is very key. So if you are doing protection, citizen science should be your friend. People could be collecting data for you, and then you are sending it, and then, or you are receiving it, and then you are providing timely intervention. So this same approach can be used to report biodiversity, citing, also flag disturbance in threatened areas, and then also share community feedback or restoration commons. Yeah. And then lastly, I would talk a little bit about bioacoustics before we go to the question and answer session, but it's okay, we can maintain that. you know, so these are like, bioacoustic sensors are still useful here. I mentioned it earlier, but just repeat a little bit. And particularly useful for verifying presence of key sensitive species in an area. They independently confirm whether certain species are present, or when or even when people are not on site. So you can just as set these instruments in the forest, in a mangrove, wherever you want to, record the presence of an animal or something. It's just using sensors and vocals. So you don't necessarily have to be there, and then it will do all the work for you. And so it's very important in identifying key species in an area. Um, so that's a little bit about MRV in these various steps. Um, so one thing I would say in ending my talk is that, MRV is not just a tool. It is, a system that combines, measurements, reports, verification from both technology and people, right? So it needs technology, no doubt about that, but it also needs people. And the people are us. And thank you for your work. Thank you for having me. I look forward to very interactive discussion. Right.
Right. Thank you so much, Angelina. That was like really, really great. Now we can open for question and answers. Does anybody have any question that you want to ask? Or any feedback, or if you want to share something, especially on the MRV strategies that you are currently doing? Anyone? I'm gonna stop sharing first because I cannot see the chat box. Let's see. Okay. Yes. Diego, you can go first. Feel free to unmute yourself.
Yes. Hi, Angeline. Thanks for the class, for the lecture. Really interested. I've been trying to get geolocation metadata from photos, and I couldn't do it. I don't know. I would like to know how do you do it? Which app do you use to read people's metadata? If you could share, please.
Yeah, I would say that it doesn't necessarily need an app. With the way I got my data, I really didn't need an app. I just sent the photo to myself. I was trying to test it to see. And then I open the photos, and then I'll see their details. It comes with a metadata. So you are able to see the coordinates up there. So you copy those coordinates, or you type them into a system, and then you sort of try to map it to see the distribution. So you could use ArcGIS or QGIS. Once you have the coordinates, you can even use Google Map. Once you have the coordinates, you are able to, see the distribution. So the key thing I would say is that the coordinates is what matters. The coordinates, the metadata. If you don't lose that one, that would be great. So you don't necessarily need a special app to do this. There could be some special apps, but I didn't use a special app.
Yeah, thank you. I was wondering if it's someone else's picture, can you access someone else's metadata if they send you the picture?
Yes, yes. And if they send it in a very, correct procedure, like if you take a screenshot of the picture and you send it, people are not going to see it. And you could send a picture to yourself on WhatsApp, I think. Sometimes it's able to come with the metadata. Other times it's not. It just depends on how you send it. Sometimes you can even send it as a PDF, and you're able to see it's, it doesn't strip off, the data that is hidden. If you send it into a cloud-based system, it keeps all the data as well. To an email, to something, it keeps all the data as well. But so it just depends on how you send in the information, or the photos. If if you don't send it well, people are not able to see it. And thank you, Diego.
Thank you. Yeah, so Ita, do you want to go first, and then we will address the question on the chat box. Feel free to unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you very much. Sorry, I came in when you are already presenting because my friend Sharif just shared the link. And I happen to be very much interested in what you're doing because I've worked, personally, I'm a developer. I've worked with several Ghanaian institutions as well as community teams. We've developed a similar thing, but specifically for agriculture, where the geotagged photos are captured using a mobile application. And the mobile application, once the device captures the image, it actually puts it as a watermark on the image. So the location metadata, as well as the exact time, can be retrieved anytime. And it's something that I can just say it's very, very interesting. Seeing it coming in and seeing you presenting, it's something that I feel kind of proud a bit. Yeah, so it's a good way to go. So the thing I discussed with Sheriff was about having it integrated in a system where, like, for example, here in Kenya, uh, knowing areas where such data is being collected. Like, for instance, you have a certain organization has been allocated a certain number of hectares of land to restore.
Mm-hmm.
So the thing is, I wanted to learn more from you now. How do you plan to continuously how can I put it? Continuously collect data about the growth of for example, the mangroves, for instance, in a certain area over a certain period of time, say 2-3 years, to monitor the growth with integration of the ArcGIS, for instance, or the kind of tools that you're using to collect the mapping. Maybe if you can answer that, it will be good. But at the same time, the thing that I was trying to share with my friend Sheriff was maybe coming up with a similar thing, which I believe it will be good to reach out later on if time allows. Uh, the system was to actually rank individuals based on their participation. It's not basically using a device, a hardware device, but rather their mobile phone. Once they log into like a mobile application that we'll develop, for instance,
Mm-hmm.
it can be able to be capturing what they are doing over time, which now reflects the whole organization, the whole team, and also rank the different organizations, how they are participating in activities like tree planting, the number of trees that are planted, as well as the coverage. So I believe it's a good thing you're doing. Maybe just share the tiny details of how you're trying to capture using to bring in the ArcGIS or S3 ArcGIS to actually map the areas over time, and how are you planning to do that?
Yeah. So if you're trying to map the area over time, so you need a change map, right? So you need what is there now, and then over time, when you collect your data, you can look at, the ecological changes that has happened in the area. But then for you to revisit the same area several times and again, um, before you get your land cover change map, you need to establish a permanent sample plot, right? So that you can always go to that same place. So for your kind of work, because you need to go to that same place all the time, your plot must be a fixed plot, right? And then you repeatedly go to the same place, go to the same mangrove or forest or whatever you live, and measure them accordingly, consistently. I don't know how your sample design looks like, but consistently for the period of 3 years, right? I give you an example in Rwanda. They established an assisted natural regeneration site. They use ANR as a restoration strategy to restore an area. And they did that consistently for 3 years. So what they did is that every 3 months they would go and clear. So they will go and clear pteridium. So assisted natural regeneration is basically the removal, assisting desired species to survive. So you could be weeding around or removing invasive species. So what they were doing was removing invasive species, pteridium maculinum, or bracken fern, as many of us know. And they did that consistently for 3 months, for 3 consecutive years. So what they did was that they established a permanent plot, because you always have to come back to it. And so theirs was application of treatment, but yours will be collection of data. So you always go back to it and collect the same data over time. And then you develop a land cover change map. You need a cover change map to, ascertain what used to be there and what is there now. And then you can tell if there's been some form of additionalities or not, right? Or it's even declining. But based on what you're doing, I'm not sure your project will decline. And there will always be additionality. Well, thank you for the question. I'm happy to have further discussions with you on this, on your projects. You said you're from Kenya.
Yes, yes, I'm from Kenya.
Okay, great. I'm
Yeah,
happy.
thank you very much. Thank you very much for clearing that. Maybe just put it how we've tried to do it within Ghana, for instance. Ghana is primarily on cocoa farms as well as rice farms, and continuous monitoring, especially bringing in the aspect of ArcGIS into that. The way we develop that system for them, uh, there is that polygon capture. So, for instance, what you're doing, you're trying to restore degradation in a certain area. So that piece of land where you are going in for the first time, where you want to restore, you go, say you draw something like a polygon using that, for example, if you're using a mobile application. So the first point where the individual stands at within that area is where it becomes point A, then it moves to point B while walking. So it continuously draws from point A to point B to point C to point D, then back to point A. So within that area, it is where the land will now be captured, that area. It will be captured on the map. So anything that happens within that area over time is what will be monitored. If there is any online software that will be visiting, you should be able to retrieve that polygon once the data has been submitted. Yeah, I think you just answered it well. I think you're doing a good job. Thank you very much.
And thank you, Soiti Emmanuel. I hope I pronounced it well.
Cool. Thank you so much. Really love the conversation that's going on. I think we can take one last question from Curtis.
Thank you very much, Angeline. That's a very impressive work that you are doing. I'm Kratos from Blue Carbon, Tanzania, and my question is strictly based on your experience and the cost coverage and the kind of accuracy. So you've mentioned some of the techs like drones, I don't know, and there's a field plot and so my first question will be what will be an estimate cost? You don't have to answer it now if you don't have. Maybe we can make a follow-up of this drone thing. I know there will be some sort of things to get down the data to a meaningful really well. And how does it compare in terms of errors with someone doing the random plots on is it more successful than the random plots, or random plots are still doing better based on present technology? And then what will be the cost to have this system, estimated cost to get the data from the tech side? Yeah, that's my question will be. And then the second question will be on the verification. What will be the low cost way to do the verification part? Because measurement and reporting, these are the things that can be done at the local, no resource, not much resource. But what will be the least costful way to verify the things? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, your question is very interesting. Um, I would say that I am not very sure of how much it will cost you to use a drone or to purchase one, but I know drones are very expensive, right? So for a small organization, I wouldn't say that would be very cost effective to do that, right? Um, I I wouldn't say that for a small organization, but for a big organization that's able to afford that, why not? It's much simpler and straightforward. And the question or on whether or not one is effective on over the other, it's more. I wouldn't say one is effective over the other. I would draw back to what kind of question are you asking? What are you looking for? So what you're looking for, if it's going to be, achievable or more verifiable with a plot-based measurement, I would say you should go for that. If it's going to be achievable, we're looking at the canopies, then you should go for that. But then there's no right or wrong answer. It just depends on the kind of question that you are asking. So if I am, for example, looking at biodiversity, I am not going to look at it from a bird's eye view. I'm not going to look at it from, collecting data from drones, because that's not going to give me what I want. I want to know what is there. So I would rather want to work with the botanist, go to the forest, establish random plots like you mentioned, and then see what is there. So I want to see the species richness. I want to see the diversity. I want to see the composition. But if I look at it from a bird's eye view, that's not going to give me the answer. So it's really more about what you're looking out for. What you're looking out to do. Yeah. So I wouldn't say there's one, we prefer one over the other. It just depends on the kind of work you're doing and then what you want to report on. But then on the issue of the cost, I am not very sure of how much it will cost you to do that.
Thank you
Right.
very much, Angela.
Cool. Thank you so much, Curtis and Angelina. Does anybody have any last question before we close the session? Also, Angelina, if anyone here would like to contact you after this session, how can they do so?
Yes, I'm going to type my email at the chat session. Okay, so when you send me an email, you could just in your title add MRV to it so that I know where you're coming from. Or in your subject line, you can add MRV to it. So my email is in the chat, and I look forward to having conversations with you all. And thank you for having me.
Great. Thank you so much, Anila. This is like super great. One of the most clearest class that we've ever had so far. Thank you so much, and also great questions from everybody as well. So basically, Curtis, I'll share with you the recording of this session, so you could see again the slide deck as well. And Angelina, is it okay if I share the presentation too to them? because we
Yes,
have a group.
yes, yes. Please go
Right.
ahead.
Right. Okay, cool. Thank you so much, everybody. This is great. Feel free to email Angelina after this if you have further questions. Thank you so much. I will see you again next month. I mean, this month. It's already February for our next call. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Angelina.
Thank you, Fatin. It was great having you today.
Thank
And
you.
thanks for having me and everyone. I look forward to hearing from you and all the wonderful work that you've been doing.
Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
Have a nice day.